So, as the SDP, you're a small political party in the UK. What problems do you face being a small party?
Well, size itself is a problem. I'd always want more members and more resources, but if you get the foundations right, one of the things we have tried to do is to be very clear about what we believe in, and we published something called the New Declaration in 2008, which is 18, which is about that. And I would say, have a read of it. If you agree with most of it, join us, and if you don't. So we were very careful to try and get that right, and I don't think many. I'm not just saying this, I don't think many other political parties are as clear about what they're for. We're for industry, we're for family. A lot of the things that we argue for are slightly countercultural now. I mean, just a topical one today. Yesterday, Liz Truss announced that there wasn't going to be a US trade deal. And everyone says, oh, that's terrible. No, I don't. I don't want one. We've got a large trade surplus with the United States now. And you mess around with that at your peril. We're not we've had enough of, the sort of free trade liberal approach, getting rid of our jobs and just being totally indifferent to what is made where and by whom, even if it's slavery. We're against that. I think we've thought things through. I think we're slowly, gradually convening a good constituency. All of the metrics. I mean, one thing I would say about leading a smaller political party is that I'd be concerned if things weren't progressing, but they always do. Every quarter, every year, we get better results. We had a major win in Leeds City Council. Wayne Dixon won at Middleton. Now that was typical SDP. It took, I said at the time, it was an overnight success. Took 4 years of work. This is just hard work. But when we won, when the public really got to know us there, and that's about 33,000 people in Leeds now have an excellent SDP councillor who you could build the civilization on what Wayne's doing. So it's a major victory. When it happened, we got more votes than all the other parties put together. It was massive. So
I didn't know that bit.
Yeah, and this was, I mean, when we started, Labour, I think when Wayne first tackled that seat, it was 2017, we got 500 votes. They had 3,500. Most people would have given up at that point, said it can't be done. Then we just narrowed it, and then when we won, we beat them, literally beat Labour, Tories, Greens, Lib Dems put together. So an excellent victory, and it just is hard work. You've just got to put the time in. One of the things that you do have as a smaller party, though, is you have a lot of freedom, because the big parties, what the main participants and politicians in Labour, and they're very fettered. They're terrified of speaking the truth. And there's nothing stops us. We will just say it as we see it.
And you're right about the big parties, because they're trying to hold so many factions together. Tories, Labour, Lib Dems, all of them have got so many factions. They're scared of saying something in case it upsets this faction, who then attack that faction, and they end up saying nothing. And that's where we get this political speak from, a way of answering a question that doesn't really say anything, so you can't really offend somebody. And you did the opposite a minute ago. You said, go on the website, read our declaration. If you like it, join us. If you don't, don't. I've never heard a politician say that before, actually saying, don't join us.
Oh, no, well, I mean, if you don't agree with that, I don't want you. And also, and if you don't agree with our policies, don't vote for us. I mean, for instance, we have policies on housing and industry and things, but we also have policy on the migration crisis. We've got a solution to it, which will work. Now, a lot of people say, well, it's harsh or whatever, but it's not. It's just sensible. And most people...
I would like to hear that.
Well, that's basically, you've got to stop the channel flow. If you allow people to come into your country and stay via this illegal route, you will have any number of people. I mean, you had 27,000 last year, you could have 40,000 this year. The incentives are wrong. You have to... I think all the ideas of pushbacks in the channel are wrong. I don't think you can do that. I think you can, as soon as they arrive, you've got to process them overseas on a British overseas territory, and there has to be zero chance that any of those people can gain access to the UK and settle here. Zero, absolutely zero. If you had that, I promise you, Nick, people wouldn't spend 5,000 euros on a cross-channel. It would just stop it overnight. You'd build the facility in Ascension Island or whatever, but it would never be used. You get maybe a few hundred people, then it would stop. But the problem is that the country, the politicians lack the will to do this. Now, the people that say, well, that's too harsh or whatever, I said, don't vote for us if you don't want a solution. Don't vote for us, vote for someone else.
No, I think, didn't Margaret Thatcher say that when she leaves politics, she's going to set up a company and it's going to be called Rent a Spine? Because she
Yeah.
was sick of all her cabinet colleagues and other politicians not having a spine. And the way I describe our channel crossing problem, the illegal crossing, is it's like a TV game show. We've said to the whole world, if you can get here, you win the jackpot. We're going to put some barriers in your way. You've got to get across Europe. You've got to find a smuggler. You've got to pay money. You've got to get across the channel. And with all these little barriers, but along the way, we'll be cheering you. And when you get there, you've won. You've won the jackpot. You've won the game.
You've got something that you haven't paid for, though. That's the problem. I mean, and again, politicians on the left used to understand this. Harold Wilson, Peter Shaw would talk about the social wage. What do you get if you're a British citizen? You get education, you get housing, you get health support. You're with us. This is it. Now, if you're in a country like France, which is not an unsafe country, it's a civilized country, there can be no case of any asylum seeker from France. That's it, flat. I made a film earlier on the year called 10 Truths About the Migrant Crisis on the SDP's channel on YouTube. Have a look. And it just busts 10 myths about it. You cannot be you can't be a legal asylum seeker from France. It's impossible.
Again, all comes down to backbone. And that's what we're missing in our political class at the moment, is a backbone. And part of that is it's always short-termism. Most politicians are always thinking about their next election because they want to be voted in again. No one's ever thinking, and that's how we've got into our energy crisis. No one's ever thinking the long term. No one's ever thinking, I'll do the tough things now and take some stick because I love my country. And it might cost me my job at the next election, but I don't care because I know I'm leaving my country in a better position than when I found it. They're the sort of people we need in politics.
Totally agree. I mean, Nick, if you'd let me, I just want to say a few things about the energy crisis, because that is the biggest thing. I mean, the proximate cause, you could say, is this insane war that Russia is fighting. And that's possibly the proximate cause. But leave that aside, the lack of preparation is down to this anti-planning, anti-long-term thinking crisis in British politics, and not just the political parties, the way we think generally. And you know, the failure to invest in nuclear energy, and Nick Clegg, you know, that clip of him 10 or 12 years ago saying, well, it'll take 10 years. Well, of course it will. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. But look at the figures. Look how much it's cost us. I just want to go through, it sounds boring, but go through the figures. The subsidies, rightly, I mean, you need the government's right to help households in this crisis, but the bailout's going to cost 150 billion to households, probably cost another 50 billion for firms, and you don't know how long it's going to go on for. That's just the next two years in the case of houses, or 6 months with firms. Now that's 200 billion. What could you have done if you insensibly invested that? Well, I'll tell you. Sizewell C is projected to cost 22 billion. That's 6% of the UK's electricity needs. Hinkley C is a bit more. That's about 28 billion. That's 6% as well. Now, the Rolls-Royce smaller modular reactors are even cheaper. Well, they don't provide as much energy. You need more of them. But basically, the nuts and bolts of it, this subsidy, you're not getting anything for it. You're just stopping the economy crashing. If you'd invested that 10, 12 years ago, you could have produced 60% of our energy, our electricity needs from that. But they are so blinkered, they refuse to do it. And it is a scandal.
And all that 60% of all that money, of all those billions, is leaving the country because we're importing all our energy. So it's not even like we're getting any benefit of this extra debt. It's all going abroad.
No, it's so bad. And not only that, Nick, another thing that the SDP is campaigned consistently on, there's a wrongness in the way these people think. The Tories, actually, the coalition government, it was Francis Maude that closed down British nuclear fuels. That shows the ambition. And literally 5 years after, 5 years after they did that, Cameron was buying a pint for Xi and saying, would you like to come and build us a nuclear power station? That is, you've got to, I have said before, it sounds terrible, you've got to hate the country to do that. Why would they do that? Why would they go to the Electricity de France as well? Why would you subcontract an industry that you were pioneers in the 50s and 60s to the French and the Chinese. It's absolutely insane, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And it's exactly the same attitude on the railways. They are, the franchises are largely run by Trenitalia or SNCF or the Dutch railways or the German railways with Deutsche Bahn. This Tory government that we've had, it's not that they think that railways can't be run by the state. They just want it run by other states. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful in my view. They've got no pride, absolutely no pride.
Again, short-termism. We're only looking at the next election, because the world at the moment, Cameron was saying the Chinese are our friends, Putin's our friend, so let's buy energy off Saudi Arabia, who could fall any day. Putin, who could fall any day. China, we're going to end up having a war with China, probably in our lifetime. But 10, 12 years ago, we were saying all these people are lovely, because they don't realize, or they don't care. In so many years' time, things change.
They do. I mean, it's actually dangerous. But I'm actually on this. I'm just talking about the lack of national pride in convening. What do you think we're so incapable of running these things and doing these things ourselves? I reject that. I think we're governed by people that don't care. And we put out an economics green paper last year called "The End of Indifference," because I think all of this is just complete indifference. They don't care. We're educated over the last sort of 30, 40 years of liberalism to think it really doesn't matter where anything, who does what, and anything goes. And I'm afraid we've paid a high price for that.
So, William, we've got a general election in the next 2 years. It could be sooner, but I very much doubt it. They're going to want every day they've got this new Tory government to try to fix all the mistakes they've made. But let's be honest, try to make it look like they've corrected the mistakes that have been made. So what are your plans for the next general election?
Well, first, I agree with you. I mean, no one knows, do they? But I think it's very unlikely that you get an election next year. I think 2024 is probably the landing spot, probably earliest Easter and then summer. So we'll wait and see. But actually, it can go to 2025, actually, January. Not many people know this.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, legally, January 2025 is an option, but I don't think it'll get there. But so, no, I mean, we're working very hard on this now. So it's an important benchmark for the SDP, any political party, general election. Now, in the 80s, obviously, we got, millions of votes as part of effectively the third force in British politics. And it's quite a different situation now. In 2015, we had 6 candidates, and then, in 2017, we had 6 candidates, and then in 2019, at very short notice, we put 20 together. So what I'm after is 3 figures. I think that's a reasonable aim for a party our size. Certainly, we'll have candidates in every single region in the country, and there's some areas, in particularly Yorkshire and London, where we're quite strong. We might have many candidates. So that's what we're doing. It's not going to be easy, but again, what you can't do. I mean, a point I always raise is that there never has been in British political history a case of a party coming from nowhere. I mean, I suppose the SDP started at the top in the 80s and then actually worked its way down. But all throughout political history, the Labour Committee at turn of the century, 1900, formed a government in the 30s. Again, the post-war Liberal Party that was built up by Joe Grimond basically took 20 years to get to national prominence again. Green Party is interesting, which is a model not for their policies, but for what they've built. Ecology Party in the 70s turned themselves into the Green Party, and by the late 80s, everyone knew the Green Party was there. UKIP was a single issue party. It was a little bit different. It's a lot easier to convene around a single issue. In terms of, you convene your support much more quickly. The downside of that is that your ceiling's quite low. So UKIP got nearly 4 million votes and got 1 MP out of it. And one of the reasons for that, about half the public wouldn't vote for UKIP. And what we're trying to do is actually the opposite. It's to convene a broad spectrum of sensible people and a majority. That's what we're after. So it's a harder thing, but it will take time. I don't think it needs to take 20 years nowadays. I think 10 or 15 years, but we're in for the long haul, and that's what we'll do. So I've no doubt at all next election will be a substantial improvement on what we did in 2019.
I really hope so. I love you guys. I like what you stand for. I like the way you go about business, and I'd like to see you taking more and more traditional Labour voters away from that lunatic party, because you are what old Labour used to represent. You're representing the people, the working people. You're sticking up for the country. You're patriotic, and that's desperately what we need. We need some opposition.
Well, that's right. I mean, people, I mean, again, when people find out about us, you know, Dave Bettany stood in the South Yorkshire mayoral and he got around, and honestly, people love him. And, you know, we made it's stages and stages, but we contested the London mayoral and got under 1%. And we pushed our vote in Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster to over 5%. I mean, for us, that's very good. You know, some big parties might think, okay, well, what's that? But that is another sort of major sort of benchmark for us. He'll just keep on going. I mean, you know, South Yorkshire, as soon as, if you did a blind test, we'd win the elections now, because that's where our values are. And it's just you've just got to keep on plugging away.
And that's what Yorkshire is: common sense Labour voters. And when I think of Yorkshire, the Red Rose, that's what I think of. People fighting for a better tomorrow.
Yeah, and you've got to give people the opportunity. I mean, one of the other principles is you've got to build it. Nigel Farage said this. I don't agree with everything he says, but he said you've got to build it before they use it, and that's true. You've got to put in the hard yards. People get to know about it a little bit, and then eventually the time will come and they say, I'm going to hop on this train. I'm going to use that vote for the SDP.